Last month, I found myself sitting across from a senior policy advisor at a quiet coffee shop in D.C. He spent nearly an hour showing me draft after draft of new AI safety regulations, thick stacks of paper filled with terms like algorithmic auditing and precautionary ethical frameworks. He seemed genuinely convinced that a few well-worded mandates could put a leash on the future. He looked at me with this weary parental concern and said, "We just need to slow down enough to make it safe."
The classic argument,
yeah.
The decelerationist view.
Exactly. But as he was talking, a notification flashed on my phone. Meta had just finalized a deal for 6.6 gigawatts of dedicated nuclear power.
Wow.
I watched his face as I slid the phone across the table. That one number 6.6 gigawatts seemed to physically deflate him. In an instant, his entire world of guardrails and alignment committees felt like a child trying to stop a tidal wave with a plastic shovel.
You could just see it click.
Oh, completely. He didn't even read the article. He just stared at the headline, his hands hovering over his pile of white papers as if they'd suddenly turned into lead. He muttered something about environmental impact, but you could tell his heart wasn't in it. He knew the game had changed. What I realized in that moment was that we aren't having a debate about ethics anymore. We're witnessing a thermodynamic takeover.
That's the phrase. That is exactly the phrase.
The illusion that we can manage this transition through bureaucracy is evaporating. When the massive compute requirements of 2026 finally collided with the hard reality of the power grid, the industry didn't ask for permission, it went nuclear.
It had to.
That instantaneous shift from the polite fiction of responsible AI to the raw atomic pursuit of energy superabundance left me wondering, are we witnessing the final days of human-led policy or the first hours of a world where physics is the only regulator that matters?
It is a striking image, isn't it? The stack of papers versus the nuclear reactor.
Bureaucracy versus physics.
Exactly. But if we really look at what you witnessed in that coffee shop, it wasn't just, a business deal or some kind of failure of policy. It was a manifestation of a physical law that has been operating on this planet for, 4 billion years?
4 billion.
You call it a thermodynamic takeover. And honestly, looking at the research we have in front of us today, that is probably the most accurate description possible.
We tend to get stuck, right? We see AI as a tech issue or an economic one.
Or a sociological one.
Yeah.
But today, we need to look at it through the lens of physics. Specifically, we need to look at a concept called the Maximum Entropy Production Principle, or MEPP.
MEPP. Okay, let's unpack this right at the start, because usually when we talk about entropy, we're talking about disorder, right? Things falling apart. My coffee getting cold, my desk getting messy, the universe just slowly winding down into this gray nothingness. It sounds like a bad thing.
That is the classical view, yes. The second law of thermodynamics. It says the universe tends toward equilibrium, toward heat death, essentially.
It wants to be boring.
It wants to be boring, wants to be flat. But there's a massive, glaring paradox there. If the universe just wants to be a lukewarm soup of nothingness, then why do we have stars? Why do we have hurricanes? Why do we have, us? Why does complex life exist at all?
Right. Life seems like the exact opposite of disorder. We are highly organized structures. We are not a lukewarm soup. At least I hope I'm not.
Exactly. And this is where the sources we're diving into today, specifically a fascinating 2025 review paper by Sawada and his colleagues on the birth and evolution of life. They just changed the narrative completely.
How so?
They argue that life didn't emerge despite the second law of thermodynamics. It emerged because of it. To understand that 6.6 gigawatt nuclear deal, you have to understand the very first strand of RNA.
That's a huge leap.
It is, but they are driven by the exact same universal imperative to burn energy, to dissipate gradients.
That is a big claim. So, okay, our mission for this deep dive is to trace that line. We're going from a single molecule in a primordial soup all the way to a nuclear-powered data center.
That is the mission. We have the Sawada paper on the physics of life. We've got a massive report from Accenture on sovereign AI, which details how nations are reacting to this incredible energy hunger.
And the infrastructure side.
And we have insights from Frontier One and Kava.io on the actual infrastructure that's being built to feed it. But you're right, it all starts with that fundamental question. Why does life even exist?
Okay, let's start there. Schrödinger, the cat guy. He had some thoughts on this, didn't he? Long before the cat became a meme.
He did. Way back in 1944, Erwin Schrödinger wrote a book called What is Life? It's a classic, a foundational text. And he pointed out that living matter seems to evade this decay to equilibrium. It stays organized.
He called it negative entropy, right? Like it's sucking order out of the environment to maintain itself.
Precisely. It eats order to stave off its own disorder. But he couldn't fully explain the mechanism. Why does nature allow this? Why does it permit these little pockets of complexity to exist?
It seems like a cheat code against the universe.
It does. And the Sawada paper takes this a huge step further using the maximum entropy production principle. So, to get your head around it, think of a tornado.
Okay, I'm picturing a tornado. Destructive, chaotic, powerful.
In human terms, yes. But in physics terms, a tornado is a solution. It's an answer to a problem. The problem is a gradient.
A gradient, like a difference in something.
Exactly, a difference in temperature or pressure. You have a pocket of hot, unstable air and a pocket of cold, stable air.
Yeah.
Nature hates gradients. It wants to equalize them. It wants everything to be the same temperature.
Okay, so it wants to mix them.
It wants to mix them. Now, you could just let that air mix slowly, passively, like a cup of coffee cooling on a counter. That's passive dissipation. It's slow, it works, but it's inefficient.
And nature is impatient.
When the gradient is strong enough, when the difference is extreme, nature doesn't wait. It actively builds a structure. A tornado.
So the tornado is a machine.
It's a machine built to mix that air as violently and as fast as possible. The tornado exists to destroy the gradient that created it. It is what we call a dissipative structure. Its entire purpose is to dissipate energy.
So the tornado isn't a thing in the sense that it wants to survive or has a personality. It's just a mechanism the atmosphere uses to reach equilibrium faster. It's a mixer.
Precisely. And here is the core argument of this entire deep dive life. It's just a very, very complex tornado.
That is slightly humbling.
The Reddit discussion we looked at regarding the characteristics of intelligence highlights this perfectly using the work of Rod Swenson. The argument is that the first purpose of life wasn't survival for survival's sake. It wasn't to pass on genes.
It was just to burn energy.
It was to act as a mechanism for the universe to dissipate gradients faster than non-life could.
So I like to think I have free will and, high-minded goals, maybe write a novel one day. But you're telling me that on a fundamental level, physics just sees me as a very elaborate machine for turning cheeseburgers into heat.
In a way, yes. A very, very clever and beautifully complex machine. But it's a machine nonetheless. And what's so powerful about this idea is that it explains the origin of life where other theories often get stuck.
The jump from chemistry to biology.
Yes. The Sawada paper details this transition from the material world to the pre-RNA world. They use a dynamical system approach, basically a lot of math. And they found that if you have a soup of polymers, just basic molecular chains, and the concentration of those polymers hits a critical mathematical point,
something special happens.
The entropy production doesn't just go up linearly.
Yeah.
It doesn't just get a little faster. It goes exponential.
It explodes.
It explodes. It creates what they call a self-replicative molecular reaction. The molecules start copying themselves.
But why? Why would they do that?
Not because they want to live, but because a self-replicating system, by its very nature, burns through resources. It burns through the energy gradient much, much faster than a stagnant pool of chemicals ever could.
So replication is the most efficient strategy for dissipation.
It's the ultimate strategy. The purpose, if you want to use that word, of that first replicating RNA was just to help the universe reach equilibrium a little bit faster. It created a stable pattern, a little whirlpool of complexity, by constantly disposing of entropy into its environment.
Okay, so we have these tiny molecular tornadoes replicating away, burning through the chemical energy in the primordial soup. That makes sense on a micro level, but how do we get from there to a civilization, to that advisor in the coffee shop stressing over policy papers?
We have to scale up. And the rule of scaling in thermodynamics is brutal and simple. Complexity costs energy. The more complex you are, the more energy you have to burn just to stay alive.
It's like owning a sports car versus a sedan. The maintenance is higher.
Exactly. And the Sawada paper discusses this beautifully. The question is, why did single cells bother to become multicellular organisms? Why not just stay as a happy soup of bacteria?
I'd always assumed it was about, efficiency. 2 heads are better than 1, or 2 cells, maybe safety in numbers.
Those are the biological benefits, yes. But the thermodynamic cause is all about geometry. A single cell has a hard limit on how much energy it can process. That limit is its membrane.
Its surface area.
The surface area to volume ratio. There's only so much food you can absorb and waste you can expel through that skin. But what happens if you form a 2-dimensional sheet of cells? or a soup like the primitive hydra.
You drastically increase your surface area.
Drastically. You can now process way more nutrients, which means you can burn way more energy. You become a better dissipative structure.
So nature favored complexity because it was better at burning fuel.
It always favors the path of maximum entropy production. The paper mentions something called bifurcation theory. At any given point, life has choices, different evolutionary paths it can take. Bifurcation theory suggests it will always choose the path, the mode that produces the most entropy. If being a complex, multicellular blob burns more energy than being a soup of single cells, nature selects for the blob.
So we became complex because it was the most efficient way to be wasteful.
Wasteful implies it's useless. Efficient at dissipation is the thermodynamic term. And it's not just about being a blob. The next step is differentiation. Specialized cells.
Heart cells, lung cells, brain cells.
Right. This creates what the paper calls a cooperative use of resources that maintains the system very, very far from equilibrium. Your brain cells couldn't survive on their own, but as part of the system, they allow the whole organism you to find and consume energy in ways a simple blob never could.
So I'm a cooperative of cells designed to maximize my cheeseburger consumption.
Essentially. But then we hit a ceiling. A biological body can only burn so much energy internally. Our metabolism, it's roughly 4 million joules per year.
4 million joules. That sounds like a lot, but I'm guessing compared to a nuclear reactor or even a car.
It's a rounding error. It's basically a 100-watt light bulb running constantly. That is the physical limit of our biology.
So for billions of years, that was the cap. Life could get more complex, but it couldn't get past that 100-watt light bulb limit per organism.
More or less. And this is where the Sawada paper introduces a concept that bridges the gap all the way to your coffee shop story. It's called external entropy production.
External entropy production. Okay, so this means we stop burning things inside our stomachs and start burning things outside our bodies.
Exactly. Think about it. For almost the entire history of life, all energy was burned inside biological membranes. Metabolism, digestion, respiration.
Internal combustion.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
But then, a few 100,000 years ago, humans appeared, and we started doing something radically new. We started burning energy outside of our bodies. We made fire.
The first act of external dissipation.
Then we domesticated animals, outsourcing some of our metabolic work to them. We built tools. We invented agriculture, which is a way of restructuring the entire ecosystem to channel more solar energy into forms we can consume. Then we built steam engines. We built factories.
We formed societies.
We formed societies that themselves act as massive, continent-spanning dissipative structures.
We outsourced our metabolism to the planet.
We scaled it. Today, the average human's internal consumption is still that 4 million joules, your personal 100-watt light bulb. But our external consumption, the energy we burn through our cars, our homes, our industries, our data centers, is 8 billion joules per year, per person.
Wait, 4 million versus 8 billion?
8 billion. And it's growing at 2% annually. We have built a civilization that exists, from physics perspective, primarily to facilitate external energy dissipation on a planetary scale.
So when we look at the Industrial Revolution or the tech boom, we tell ourselves a story about innovation or capitalism or progress or making life better.
Right.
But you're saying those are just the narratives we wrap around the core physical reality. The reality is that the universe found a way to jump from a 4 million joule system to an 8 billion joule system by creating us and our societies.
And now, it looks like we're about to make another one of those jumps, a really big one. And this brings us right back to the data center, the ultimate modern dissipative structure.
This has to connect back to the 6.6 gigawatt deal, because if the data center is the new body for burning energy, then AI is its metabolism.
Correct. It is the ultimate engine for external entropy production. And this is where we have to look really closely at the first major story that's emerging from our sources. It's not just about building more computers. It's about a fundamental rewiring of how civilization powers itself.
We're talking about the strategic integration of small modular nuclear reactors, SMRs, with sovereign data centers.
Yes, SMRs. We've heard about these. They're basically mini nuclear plants, right? You can manufacture them in a factory and ship them to a site.
Right. They're supposed to be safer, cheaper, faster to build.
Yes. But the context here is everything. Why pair them directly, physically, with data centers? The Accenture report and the Frontier analysis make this crystal clear. The grid, the old copper web we built in the 20th century, it just cannot handle the demand.
It's not just the amount of power, is it? It's the speed.
It's the jerk. That's the technical term. The sudden acceleration of demand. An AI training run doesn't gradually ramp up. It demands gigawatts of power instantly. If you try to pull 6.6 gigawatts through the public grid all at once,
You melt the wires, you black out the city.
you cause catastrophic failure. So the tech giants and the nations that are now backing them are going off-grid. They are building their own private, dedicated power plants right next to the processors.
They're building energy islands, a data center with its own personal nuclear reactor.
That's exactly what they are. And the sources are arguing this is the absolute prerequisite for achieving what they call energy superabundance.
And this is where the physics gets truly grand, right? Frontier 1 links this explicitly to the Kardashev scale.
It does. The Kardashev scale, for anyone who isn't familiar, is a way of measuring a civilization's technological advancement based on how much energy it can capture and use.
Type I is a planetary civilization, capturing all the energy that falls on its planet from its local star.
Right. Type 2 is stellar, capturing all the energy of the star itself, like with a Dyson sphere. And Type 3 is galactic.
And where are we now?
We are currently something like a 0.73 on that scale. We're a planetary civilization, but we're still mostly burning dead plants, fossil fuels. It's primitive.
So the move to nuclear-powered sovereign compute is the mechanism to push us toward Type 1.
The sources argue it's the only plausible path to Type 1. This integration nuclear plus AI is the engine that gets us there, because you need the vast, clean, reliable power from nuclear to run the AIs.
And you need the AIs to manage the unbelievable complexity of a Type I energy grid and economy. It's a feedback loop.
It's a catalyst.
Yeah.
A phase transition. That 6.6 gigawatt deal you saw, that is the sound of humanity kicking the door open to a Type I future.
It's the society-level equivalent of a biological cell evolving a mitochondrion.
That is a perfect analogy. We are building new, powerful organs that can digest nuclear fire to process information. And the stated goal in these reports is energy superabundance.
Energy superabundance. So, I mean, it sounds like a utopia, no more scarcity. But in the context of our policy advisor in the coffee shop, it sounds absolutely terrifying.
Of course.
He's trying to regulate a campfire, and they are literally building a star on Earth.
And that terror is justified, not because the technology is inherently evil, but because the scale is just so far beyond our current regulatory and ethical frameworks. The Frontier 1 article mentions that national governments purchased $10 billion worth of GPUs in 2024 alone.
$10 billion in 1 year.
The Accenture report talks about AI gigafactories. It describes how Europe and other blocs are pooling their resources to build massive, state-controlled compute clusters. They've woken up. They're realizing that data is a strategic resource, yes, but more importantly, that the ability to process that data, the raw power to burn the energy required to think at scale, is the very definition of sovereignty in the 21st century.
It's the thermodynamic takeover. If you can't burn the energy, you don't matter on the world stage.
It's harsh, but from a geopolitical and a thermodynamic perspective, it's true. And this, of course, leads to a massive geopolitical struggle. The map of the world is being redrawn. It's not about borders on land anymore. It's about who owns the compute stack.
Which is the perfect entry point for the second major story we need to cover, the one that focuses on the Pentagon and the global defense sector, because they aren't just sitting back and watching Silicon Valley have all the fun.
Far from it. They are, in fact, leading the charge. The Frontier 1 and Accenture reports are very heavy on this. The defense sector, aerospace and defense, has the highest sovereignty maturity score in the entire Accenture index. It's at 67.
So they're ahead of tech, ahead of finance, ahead of everyone.
Way ahead. Government and the public sector are right behind them. Now, you have to ask, why is the military leading the charge on sovereign AI infrastructure?
Well, the obvious answer is security, right? You don't want your secrets on a server in the country that might be hostile. You don't put the nuclear launch codes on the same cloud that hosts someone's cat photos. Security 101.
That's the surface reason, and it's a valid one. But the deeper reason, which you could read between the lines in these reports, is about avoiding regulatory capture.
Wait, can you explain that? What is regulatory capture in this context?
It's about ensuring that your military capabilities can't be shut down or slowed down by civilian policy. The sources suggest that the Pentagon and other global defense sectors are adopting decentralized sovereign compute stacks specifically to bypass what they call decelerationist policies.
Decelerationist policies, you mean? The safety regulations, the stuff the guy in the coffee shop was writing.
Exactly that. Imagine the scenario. The civilian government, driven by public fear, by ethical committees, by international treaties, says, we need to slow down AI development to ensure safety. We need to pause all training runs on models larger than X. We need a 3-year audit of every algorithm.
Which, to the average person, sounds incredibly reasonable.
It sounds prudent, but the military and the intelligence community look at that and see a fatal strategic error. They say, our adversaries are not slowing down. They're not pausing. They are not waiting for an ethics review.
It's a classic prisoner's dilemma, but with existential stakes.
It's a prisoner's dilemma driven by thermodynamics. If you unilaterally slow down your entropy production, your compute growth, you risk losing strategic dominance forever. So what do? They build their own stacks. Decentralized, sovereign, off the public grid, and more importantly, off the grid of public scrutiny and regulation.
So the safety regulations, however well-intentioned, might actually have the perverse effect of pushing the most powerful AI development out of the public eye and into these hardened sovereign defense clouds.
It's not just likely. It's already happening.
So we aren't stopping the train. We're just painting it in camouflage and putting it in a tunnel.
It's a perfect way to put it. And this is where the crucial distinction between the neocloud and the hyperscaler becomes so important.
Okay, break that down for us. Hyperscalers are the big guys we all know.
Yes. Amazon's AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, the hyperscalers, they are the dinosaurs of this new era. They're massive, they're powerful, but they are centralized and slow to adapt. The reports suggest they're actually becoming bottlenecks.
How can they be bottlenecks? They're huge.
They're huge, but they are general-purpose clouds. Everyone is fighting for their capacity, from streaming services to online stores. For specialized, high-security, high-performance tasks like running a military AI, they are surprisingly inefficient.
And the neoclouds.
These are the agile mammals scurrying around the feet of the dinosaurs. They are AI-native providers, companies like Nebius or CoreWeave, built from the ground up just for AI workloads.
And then there's another category, right? The frontliners.
Yes, these are national champions, often state-owned or state-aligned companies, like telecommunication companies, that are being transformed into national AI factories. The reports mention TELUS in Canada, Indosat in Indonesia. These are instruments of national policy. The Pentagon and sovereign nations, they prefer these specialized players, or they just build their own from scratch. Because they offer what's called full stack control.
Full stack. What does that mean in this context?
It means you can't just rent the AI model anymore. That's not sovereignty, as Frontier One points out. To ensure true strategic dominance, you have to own everything. You have to own the chip designs, you have to own the physical data center, and you have to own the electron powering it.
The land, the power, the silicon, the data, the algorithm, the whole stack.
The whole stack. Shovel-ready data center sites are the new gold mines. If you have a piece of land with a high-voltage power connection and water rights for cooling, you are a geopolitical player. The military wants to own the physics, not just rent the software.
It's amazing how perfectly this aligns with the biological analogy you were making. Nature diversifies. It creates specialized organisms for specialized environments. The military is creating a specialized computational organism, a sovereign compute stack that is specifically adapted to be immune to the virus of public regulation.
That is a very, very apt way to put it. And it brings us to another form of diversification, another path of evolution. We've talked about the giants going nuclear and the military going sovereign, but there's a third group, the rebellion.
The decentralization revolt. This is the focus of the Kava.io report.
Yes, and it's really important to understand that this isn't just about, political ideology or crypto-anarchists sticking it to the man. It is once again about thermodynamic efficiency.
How so?
The Kava.io report points out what it calls the efficiency bottleneck. They put a number on it. They claim that AWS and Google Cloud currently have 2.5 times less capacity than the existing market demand for AI training.
2.5 times less, so they literally cannot build fast enough to keep up.
They cannot. Nature hates a vacuum. Or, in our terms, nature hates an undissipated gradient. You have this huge, towering gradient of demand for compute, and the centralized providers are a bottleneck. They're a dam. So what happens when a dam is too small?
The water finds other ways through it, carves new channels.
Exactly. You get decentralized physical infrastructure networks.
Okay, this is stuff like BitandSoar and Render. I've seen these names, and it's usually framed as crypto meets AI.
Yes, and you have to strip away the crypto hype for a moment and just look at the physical structure of what they're doing. Think about it. There are hundreds of millions of powerful GPUs sitting idle or underutilized right now. They're in gaming PCs, in university labs, in the server rooms of smaller companies all around the world.
That's a massive amount of untapped potential. It's energy waiting to be burned.
It's a huge pool of latent compute. Decentralized networks like Bitensor or Render act like a mycelial network in a forest. They create a market that connects all these disparate idle resources and allows them to work together to process the load.
So it's the tornado analogy again. The one big centralized tornado Amazon isn't big enough to suck up all the heat in the atmosphere. So 1,000 smaller tornadoes spontaneously form to do the job.
It's a more distributed, more resilient, and potentially more efficient system. It acts like a more nimble biological system, outcompeting a sluggish centralized dinosaur.
And there's a trust angle here too, isn't there? The Kava.io report talks about the transparent brain versus the black box.
A huge one. Centralized AI, like the models from the big hyperscalers, it's a black box. You input a question, you get an answer. You have no real idea why it gave you that answer. You don't know what data it was trained on, what biases are baked in.
And that's a massive issue, especially if these systems are running our power grids or our financial markets or our defense systems. You need to be able to audit the decision-making process.
You need accountability. But with decentralized systems, like the Kava AI approach, you can theoretically record the entire decision-making process on-chain, on a transparent ledger. Projects like Ocean Protocol are creating marketplaces where you can monetize your data and grant access for training, but you never lose ownership or control.
It sounds a lot like what you mentioned earlier from the Reddit discussion, constraint closure.
It's the perfect technological example of constraint closure. Biological systems need accurate, honest signaling to survive. If your nervous system lies to you and tells you your hand isn't burning on a hot stove, your body dies.
Right.
A centralized AI monopoly that hides its operations is an inefficient, untrustworthy nervous system for the planet. Decentralized, transparent systems offer constraint closure, where the system can self-regulate because all the signals are public. It's thermodynamically more robust in the long run.
Okay, so just to recap the landscape here, we have the giants, the hyperscalers, going nuclear to build these massive private energy islands to feed the beast. We have the military and sovereign nations breaking away to build their own secret hardened beasts to ensure strategic dominance.
Yes.
And we have this decentralized swarm emerging from the bottom up, connecting all the spare parts of the global computer to eat up the scraps and maybe eventually out-evolve the giants.
That is the landscape of the thermodynamic takeover. 3 different evolutionary strategies, all competing to dissipate the most energy. But we need to look at the end game. We need to look at where this line ends. Because if the fundamental imperative is simply burn more energy, process more information, then biology, even human biology, is the ultimate bottleneck.
We're too slow. Our little 4 million joule metabolism can't keep up. My thumbs definitely can't keep up with an exaflop computer.
Exactly. And this leads us to the third major story, the final piece of this puzzle, and perhaps the most profound and unsettling one. The transition from biological evolution to industrial-scale synthesis.
The post-biological future.
The Sawada paper ends with a fascinating hypothesis on the general direction of evolution. It suggests that our civilization is currently in a crisis. Our external entropy production, all that CO2, all that waste heat from our servers and factories, is threatening the reservoir.
The reservoir being the Earth.
The Earth. We are heating up the room so much that the coffee cup that holds us is starting to crack.
So what happens? What does a dissipative structure do when it starts to poison its own environment?
It faces a stark choice. It either collapses or it evolves into a higher, more efficient state of organization. This is where the synthesis of biology and machine becomes not just a sci-fi trope, but a thermodynamic necessity.
We're talking about the mass production of brain-computer interfaces, like a Neuralink, as the imperative for human-machine synthesis in this new economy.
Yes. We have to stop thinking of Neuralink as just a medical device for, say, curing paralysis. That's its first application. But in this thermodynamic context, the Neuralink concept represents the biological brain connecting directly to the sovereign compute stack.
It's a bandwidth problem.
It is the ultimate bandwidth problem. You have these massive sovereign AI clouds processing exaflops of data, literal oceans of information, insights, and strategies, and you have a human brain, the supposed commander of this system, trying to interface with it through voice commands, typing on a keyboard.
It's like trying to drink from a fire hose with a coffee stirrer.
It is. It slows the entire system down. It's a bottleneck. The thermodynamic imperative, the relentless need to keep the energy and information flowing, demands a wider pipe. It demands a direct high-bandwidth connection.
So we merge with the external entropy machines.
We become the biological catalyst embedded within the silicon structure. It's the only way for the biological component in us to keep up with the processing speed of the system we have created. It's the only way to process the sheer volume of information required to manage a Type I civilization and maintain the whole system far from equilibrium.
That's a heavy thought. We're not the pilot inside the machine anymore. We become a component, a biological coprocessor.
A very important one, perhaps, the source of creativity or intuition, but a component nonetheless. But there is a dark side to this choice. The Sawada paper discusses what happens when biological systems face poor thermodynamic conditions.
When the energy runs out, or when the environment gets too toxic from waste.
Right. It brings up the examples of the Oga lotus seed, which can lay dormant for thousands of years, or tardigrades, which can survive in the vacuum of space. When conditions get bad, life goes dormant.
It forms a shell, it stops metabolizing, it enters what the paper calls a non-MEP state.
A non-maximum entropy production state. It just waits. It puts itself on pause, hoping conditions will improve.
And this applies to civilizations.
The implication is that if we fail, if we cannot secure the energy, if those 6.6 gigawatt nuclear deals fall through, or if we can't manage the waste heat and the CO2 and we trigger runaway climate change, the dissipative structure of our civilization could collapse.
A new dark age.
We might not go extinct as a species, but we could be forced into a civilizational dormancy, a lower energy, lower complexity state where we can no longer afford the energy costs of maintaining a global technological society.
So the rush for sovereign AI, the rush for nuclear power, it's not just about corporate greed or national pride. It's a survival instinct.
But it's crucial to understand whose survival we're talking about. It's not the survival of you or me as individuals. It's the survival of the civilization as a thermodynamic entity. The system itself senses that if it stops growing, if it stops increasing its energy dissipation, it dies.
So it is doing everything it can, going nuclear, going sovereign, going decentralized, even proposing to merge with our brains to keep that fire burning brighter and hotter.
That is the thermodynamic imperative at work.
This puts that coffee shop conversation you started with in a completely different light. The advisor wanted to slow down. He wanted to hit the pause button.
But the universe is screaming, speed up.
To speed up or decay. That is the fundamental choice the second law of thermodynamics offers us. There is no pause button.
There is no steady state. You are either growing in complexity and energy use, or you are decaying into equilibrium.
So what does this all mean for the listener? For the person who is driving to work or washing the dishes right now, we've gone from a single RNA molecule to nuclear-powered AI merging with our brains. It feels incredibly abstract, but also terrifyingly real.
I think it means we have to stop viewing AI as a product. It's not a new phone that you can choose to buy or not buy. It is an environmental shift. It's like the Great Oxygenation Event 2.5 billion years ago when cyanobacteria started pumping oxygen into the atmosphere.
It poisoned the old world, but created the conditions for the new one.
Exactly. It's happening, whether we like it or not. For companies and for nations, the Accenture report is blunt. Sovereignty is the only viable strategy. You have to own your part of the entropy machine. If you rely entirely on others, on the hyperscalers, on foreign powers, you are thermodynamically vulnerable. You are just a leaf caught in someone else's tornado.
And for the individual, should I go out and buy a generator and a server rack?
Maybe not quite yet. But I think you should start by understanding that the friction we all feel, the anxiety, the incredible speed of change, the political chaos, it's the friction of a phase transition. We are moving from one state of civilizational matter to another.
And is there any agency for individuals in this?
There is. The decentralization revolt offers a path for individuals to participate directly by running nodes, by owning their data, by contributing to open source models, rather than just being the fuel for the big centralized machines. But ultimately, on a personal level, it's about recognizing that we are part of a process that is much, much larger than politics or economics.
It's a lot to process. We started with the policy advisor losing hope in a Washington, D.C. coffee shop, and we ended with the thermodynamic necessity of nuclear-powered, brain-integrated AI. The thread connecting them all is that maximum entropy production principle. From a strand of RNA to entire nations, the universe seems to favor structures that burn energy efficiently and voraciously. And sovereign AI is simply the latest and by far the most powerful structure we have built to satisfy that law.
It is the next evolutionary leap. And unlike the previous ones, this one is being built with concrete and silicon and uranium.
You know, we usually try to end these deep dives with a question for you to think about. But today, I think I want to leave you with a thought that's been nagging at me ever since I read that Sawada paper. We like to think we are the architects of the AI age. We think we're building these systems to serve us.
That's the story we tell ourselves.
But if you really look at the thermodynamics, the relationship seems to be inverted. We are the biological catalyst that the universe used for 4 billion years to build a silicon-based infrastructure that's capable of burning energy at a scale that biology never ever could. We aren't the masters of the machine. We are the bootloader for a new state of matter that is finally capable of truly maximizing entropy.